Hey everybody, welcome to It's Just Bodybuilding. Big Ron Parlow here with Dusty Hanshaw and the producer, Scott McNally. Remember to like, share, subscribe, comment, and
ring the bell.
Yes, do all of those things immediately and then open another window in your browser and go to iammutant.com and use Dusty20, Big Ron 20. One of the codes, doesn't matter. Keep us employed, get your 20% off. Everyone should be buying IsoSurge all in, and everyone should get on the gear. Okay.
Lots of gear.
How are you guys doing? You know what? I don't like saying I'm your host, Big Ron Partlow, because I'm not the host. I'm the co-host. But then if you say I'm your co-host,
no.
You direct everything.
Before the show even started, here's a fun fact for everyone.
What do you mean I direct everything? Scott's the one that tells us what to do before we go on the air.
You're the mouthpiece. You're the puppet, Ron. That does the.
He's got his hand further up your ass. Wait. No, see, people need to know that when this started, Ron and I were both getting messages saying, you guys should do a podcast. And Ron reached out to me and I was like, I will do it, but you have to run it. Because I told him I've never been on that side. I've been interviewed and I'm good at answering and going back and forth, but I don't know the other side. So that was like our deal immediately. So that's why you have to say, I'm your host. You have to.
To the first episode of It's Just Bodybuilding with Big Ron Partlow and my co-host, Dusty Hanshaw. How you doing, Dusty?
Awesome. I'm excited that we finally got this thing going. After months of you being asked and me starting to hear about it, we're actually doing what they're asking for. Amazing.
Now you've
after how many episodes did it take for us to bring Scott on full time?
I don't even know.
Do you remember?
I don't even know.
Too many. We had him on, and then it was like blatantly easier and better, and then we just had to slowly work him into like having an opinion, which was cool.
What happened was I took a pee break without stopping the show because you guys kept going. And I was like, oh, this is a dream. Yeah.
Plus, he like muted it. Like we'd get talking and Scott goes, so anyways.
Yeah, he just cut us off. And then we get those little texts, the texts we get when no one realizes we should move on.
Those texts. Ron, you've talked about check-in pictures 7 times now.
Yeah. Let's move on.
This month.
Okay.
Yeah, this month.
Tell when we're heated about something.
Okay. So our lead off topic today, because we were chatting about it. This is usually pretty organic. We don't come to you guys too organized. But our lead topic today is the first bodybuilder physique that we saw in person. Is that correct, Scott?
Yes, we had a question in here somewhere, and that was basically the gist of it. One of our listeners had asked us, who was like the first bodybuilder that you ever saw, and what stood out to you about their physique?
Yep.
Yes.
Well, I remember when I first joined the gym, like I'd said, my story is, I grew up, I'd watched The Incredible Hulk and I'd seen Conan the Barbarian, right? The Arnold movie. And I was like influenced to start working out. And I was like into pro wrestling. I was a fan of The Ultimate Warrior and like all that stuff. So I'd already crossed that threshold. But when I actually first went to the gym, and you're in the real commercial gym, like for the first time, and you're looking around at all the equipment and you're seeing all the regular people training. And then there was a guy off in the corner doing barbell rows off the floor. And I sometimes wonder if he sort of was like a key influence, because I remember he had a cutoff sweatshirt that was cut off at the elbow with threads hanging.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder if that's why I was like that type of like grungy sort of like flannel shirt bodybuilder when I, went off on my journey. And he had like the threads hanging and he was wearing like normal sweatpants, like no name brand, like there no logos on him anywhere.
Right.
He didn't have on like a fancy shirt. It was like a cut off, no name brand sweatshirt, regular sweatpants. And I remember he was doing barbell rows and he had like nasty forearms. Big, like, muscular veins on them. And I remember just being like, oh man, that guy's forearms are crazy. And he was thick, like he had traps and like a back.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was probably rowing 225 at the time. It was 1990, but I'd never seen anything like that before in person. Right.
Right.
And so, he was doing that. And I remember just being like, oh, wow. And it was very impactful. And then I remember seeing him again. Like he was there every day. And I remember right away, like within a few days, I saw him again and he's on the bike and he had his hood up and his headphones in and he's just pedaling on the bike the entire time I was training. And the only thing I could see was his forearms hanging out of a cutoff sweatshirt. And, his face was really lean.
But let me ask you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you though, like, who was like the bodybuilder we would all know, like the big name bodybuilder? Like,
well, I'll
first
finish this story first.
Okay, that's what we want to hear.
I found out his name. I found out his name was Norm, and he was competing, and he was like the guy that was gonna like win the like regional show around there, and everyone was like, oh yeah, he's a good bodybuilder. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that he was the first bodybuilder that I saw in the gym, and
did he win?
So yeah, I think he did. He did. He was good.
This.
He was like a regular dude. Had kids and stuff, but to me, he was the first bodybuilder I saw in the gym.
Yeah.
So that always like stuck with me, and I always remembered seeing him on the bike and realizing he was getting ready for a contest and putting it together in my head that he was an actual bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that was like the first bodybuilder I remember seeing when I was like 14,
Oh, so you're real young then.
Yeah, real young. But then the first like bodybuilder that you guys would know, I mean, geez, I think I was in the deep end right away. I think it would have been 1993 when I drove 8 hours through the night to a Dorian Yates seminar. I think Dorian was like the first guy I saw. No, it was Lee Labrada.
Yeah.
Lee Labrada came to our gym. That was the first bodybuilder I saw. Lee Labrada. He came to our gym when I was like 15. Yep. And I saw him train in a tank top. And I was like,
no kidding.
Yeah. And I remember how small he was in his hoodie when he showed up. I remember thinking like, I would have been 15 or something. I remember thinking like, oh, he's not big. He's not big. And then like halfway through his workout, he took his sweatshirt off. And I was like, oh, yeah, you learn quick when Lee Labrada is around.
Yeah.
That's a game-changing scenario.
Yeah.
I love that. You know what's funny, Scott, is like I was leaning towards the same thing Ron was, because I think that the first time you see any bodybuilder in a gym, and I wasn't even into bodybuilding yet when I saw that. I just remember like a little switch went off and I was like, that's really different.
Yeah.
And I was training for hockey at the time. And I think that impacted me ending up in bodybuilding after getting injured, because I just remember training and I just kept looking over because the guy was a monster. He was doing things in the gym that, like you said, Ron, before, I'm sure if I looked back now, they were probably warm-ups to me now. But at the time, it was the most absurd thing I'd ever seen. And he was huge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then you look back and you watch. So getting into that, seeing that, I think is what brought me back to bodybuilding. But my most memorable, because when I got into working at the stores, I saw bodybuilders all the time immediately.
Oh, I
because
bet.
we would bring them in, or we'd bring them in for shows or things like that. But we brought King Kamali in when he was in like his peak, because the old owner of my show did collegiate nationals with him. And so it was really cool because you know how King had that like arrogance about him as a pro?
Yeah.
He had that as an amateur.
Did he really?
Oh yeah. Like when he did collegiate nationals, he said that when he went into the hotel, there were literally signs up like around the hotel and stuff that said the King is coming.
You're kidding
and
me.
like, yeah. And he actually showed me his routine before King came into town from collegiate nationals. And it was so funny because his buddy, my friend Bruce's friend, was filming the show on a camcorder.
Yeah.
And they're in the same class, light heavyweights, they're facing the front, and Bruce has crazy quads. And it was like right there, and then they quarter turn to the right, then they quarter turn again. And you just hear his buddy go, ooh. And you could see why, because King's like low back was just lit up, glutes were in, and you're like, so meeting him was wild. And I actually went and picked him up from the airport in a Nissan Sentra. Those are not large vehicles. he got in and he was like partially in my seat because his shoulders were so wide in that car.
Yeah.
And he was just a riot though, man. Like I quickly realized that the cool bodybuilders just loved what they were doing. Like we got in and I was like, hey man, you know, he was guest posing the next day. I was like, what do you want to do? He's like, food.
Yeah.
I'm like, where? He goes, whatever. And I was like, steak, rice? He's like, sure. We go in and it's like, I quickly realized I didn't need enough. You know, It was like, can I get 4 of these steak bowls? And I'm like, oh, okay. So we're just getting like 4 meals. He sat down and ate 2 and then took 2 for the next meal. And at the time that was unheard of to me. I was like, it's like 15, 16 ounces of protein, 6, 7 cups of rice. Eats it all, moves on. It was really cool to kind of meet those guys along the way. And those are guys actually that made me realize I could make money at this. What was meeting them. I know I've told you, Ron, before, like when I met Chris Cook, how he was.
Yeah.
Did I tell you about that, Ron, Scott?
Yeah.
I don't know if I've heard that story.
So he came into town. I picked him up at the airport and he was super, super nice. So we went straight to the show, set him up, did his guest posing. Then after the show, I was like, do you want to go to dinner? What do you need? And he said, yeah, do you mind if you take me to dinner and then to the hotel? So we went to dinner. We hung out. I was like not even really competing yet, you know. And so when we get done with dinner, I take him back to the hotel and he says, hey, if you ever need anything, give me a call.
Yeah.
You know, about bodybuilding. And I was like, okay, yeah. And of course, I'm never calling him. Like I have his cell phone number, but that's not appropriate. Like I was given that phone number to handle him for the weekend. And, you know, so fast forward like 2 months, I'm washing my truck and my phone rings and I pick it up because I didn't even save his phone number. I didn't need it. He's like, hey man. I'm like, who's this? He's like, it's Chris Cook. And I'm like, hello, what do you need? And he goes, I just calling to check in. Wanted to make sure you knew I was serious. If you needed anything,
you're kidding.
You know, let me know. How's your training going? And I was so floored that, I mean, I literally like chatted for a bit, hung up the phone, and then you fast forward to later that year. For my Christmas present, my wife at the time had gotten a hold of Chris and said, hey, is there any way that if I took Dusty like to Venice, could he get a workout with you for a day? And Chris was like, I have a better idea. Send him here. Send me $300 and he can hang out for the weekend. Okay. And so I actually flew out. He picked me up. I stayed in his house.
You're kidding.
We trained 3 days straight. And the first thing we did, which I thought this was really important, I think that some of you younger guys that are listening to this and girls should hear this, is so I was sitting down and I was still very much in like, holy shit, I'm having breakfast with Chris Cook.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He probably could see it because I'm sitting here in IHOP like, oh my God, why is this happening? And he goes, hey, you got to relax. He's like, none of this shit is real. And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, we just do a job. He goes, no one cares. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, here, let me give you an example. And the waitress came by and he handed her his credit card. And she took the card, flipped it over, said, can I get an ID? He handed her the ID, signed for the check. She walked away. I go, see, she has no fucking idea who I am. And it just like really clarified to me that only in the little bubble do we matter. And I think it's funny when I see a lot of these other guys get big egos in this game. He never had it. I was so blown away. And then the coolest part about the whole thing was, you know, we were very broke at the time. And I assume we were paying him for doing this. He asked for the money to just pay for everything we did.
That's crazy,
I didn't
dude.
pay $1. So it was like $300 or something for me training at Venice, going to eat, everything we did, and then flying home. And it was, to this day, one of the coolest experiences of my life. And just, I look back and he taught me so much about marketing and how because he was making 6 figures as an amateur.
Wow.
You know, and I'm like, how do I do that? And he's like,
he
well,
had a
first
contract.
he's like, well, first you have to be good looking like me, which you are not. I was like, shit. Yeah. And then he's like, then you have to be a really good bodybuilder like me, which you are not. I was like, shit. And so I had to come up with another way. But it was awesome. Yeah. So that was probably the greatest experience I had was that one.
Holy crap. And he just took an interest in you. That's just unbelievable, man. Like, I mean, that sounds like it changed everything. While you're talking about him, I looked him up because I was trying to see some of his pictures. I mean, look at these arms here. I mean, that's a crappy small picture, but
No, he was a big dude. He's like 6 feet tall too, right, Dusty?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a big guy. Yeah. He was like a obvious pro. Like when you saw him as an amateur, you're like, oh, that guy can like win.
Crazy legs, crazy calves.
look at this.
He looked like a all-American
cover here.
football player, you know.
It's a classic flex cover.
His dogs, those two dogs were amazing. They'd get like wrestling around in the backyard, like just having fun, just like my Yorkies do. Only it was scary. Like they'd run into the wall, and you're thinking they're gonna knock the wall down. You're like, oh god. So
Flex
that
was $4.99 at that time.
Yeah,
And it was 200 pages, 250 pages thick. It was like a catalog.
Yeah.
How much did you? I used to love when the magazines came in the store. You might as well have closed that store for a little while because I wasn't paying attention to shit. I had work to do.
No, I know. I remember I used to go buy Flex and MD on the same day every month.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Those
yes.
are the days.
Dangerous. What was it? Was it the major distractions? Oh, the smoke shows they put in there. It got so whorish. I was like, why is there a golf ball in her ass? Anyways.
Magazine sales.
I didn't have anything as cool as Chris Cook coming to invite me over, but I do remember seeing both kinds of stories. I remember training and getting better and seeing guys in the gym that were better than me and thinking like, oh yeah, I want to shoot for that. And then one day this guy came in, his name was Lance, and he was wearing a tank top and everything was just like 3D. You know what I mean? Like he had the crazy round delts. The thing was, he was super lean. He wasn't a big dude. He was like a middleweight or light heavy, but it was like he was getting ready for a show. And like he didn't look like anything I had ever seen before. You know what I mean? And I just said, okay, so I want to do that. I want to look like that. And then I met Jay Cutler, and he put his arm around me, and I nearly just like disappeared in his armpit. He was so freaking big. And I realized, wow, okay, so that's what a real, like... You could like seeing Jay on TV or in a magazine and then seeing him in person and really seeing scale, you really see how big he freaking was. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Jay was humongous, man.
Yeah. And I remember how sweaty his armpit was that day too.
Oh, that's freaking. Yeah. I think though, you know what I miss that I wish was still the case is, and I know Ron and I've talked about this before, is it used to be when there was a big, like a local show coming, you knew the locals that were doing it, and you were like, it was like it was like going to the Olympia. Like, who do you think's going to win, man? I mean, Bryce in the middleweight's looking crazy. I mean, we used to come like after prejudging, we'd go eat. People in the crowd and like talking about who was going to have it tonight, and it was
there was way more.
Nuts.
Like now everyone sees everybody on Instagram and everyone's posing in the gyms and
True.
stuff. So everyone knows like, oh, that one local guy's going to win classic. Like,
Yeah.
going to beat that guy. But back then, like it wasn't like that. A lot of guys stayed covered up. There was no media. So you didn't know who was the best. And there'd always be like, oh, these 5 guys are going to be in that show. And then of course one guy would kill everyone. You're like, oh, I didn't realize he was going to do that,
Yeah.
But there was a lot more like wondering. You're like, who's gonna win? And everyone thought they had a chance, but now like a lot of guys know they don't have a chance to beat that guy because his pictures were up, and they're like, I'm not gonna beat that guy. You know what I mean?
But I liked it being at the local and regional level, versus obviously Pro Qualifiers, But so I sponsored the shows for years. I did the title sponsors for all 3 of the shows for years, so they would always weigh in at my stores. And like you said, Ron, I remember this one guy, Mike Holler, that I actually still keep in touch with and stuff a little bit here and there online. I should say I follow him and see what he's up to. But he was doing the show and like coming out of like air quote retirement to compete one time. And I always knew like he had big calves and good arms. And I was like, oh yeah. And he came to the weigh-ins. I remember he wanted to make it down to heavyweight. And so he stepped on the scale and he was too heavy. And it was so funny because he had to peel down to make weight. And it was the first time I ever watched someone win an overall at weigh-ins. Like he peeled down. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And you just saw people like heads drop. And you're like, oh, this is over. I mean, he could have been a pro for sure. He just decided to make money and did real estate instead.
Right.
But he's one of those guys that just like, he could have been a pro and I think even made a bunch of money because he's like good looking, very well spoken. Like it's just like he could have chose whatever he wanted to do this. But it was really cool to see that because he was an understated guy. And at the time, bodybuilding was very, I'm coming, overstated.
Yeah.
So for him to just kind of show up and then just embarrass everyone at weigh-ins, and he didn't even mean to, he just couldn't quite make weight in a t-shirt and shorts. So
right.
Yeah.
So when you said King Kamali was going to the Teen Collegiate and Masters or Teen Collegiate and there were signs up, there were signs up around the hotel that said the King is coming. Who put those signs up?
His buddies.
Okay, so he was basically psyching everybody out by having his friends put signs up around the hotel to let them know that King Kamali was coming for them.
But in fairness, he did win the overall.
Okay, yeah.
Nationals. So yeah, he was nuts. And the video, because he did the Terminator routine in '93.
Okay.
And he was one of the few guys that did it really, really well.
Okay.
And I remember seeing that. And I mean, at this point, this was early 2000s when I'm watching it, but I'd never seen anything like it. Like I didn't know Vince Taylor at the time, so I'd never seen those things. It was awesome to see, but I guess he pulled down from like 260 to light heavyweight to win that show. So he used to always get really big and then come way down and get sliced. So I enjoy that. I missed that. I mean, the Craig Titus Kamali thing was so fun.
Yeah.
Like the fact that they genuinely hated each other was so enjoyable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
That was like probably the best magazine-based rivalry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Those are
I wonder how many of our listeners remember that. If you have, then please comment below. I want to know.
Yeah. That's a good one. See, good interaction with the crowd there, Scott.
Yeah. Try to get them coming. By the way, guys, you should comment with questions for the next episode. I'll throw that out there while we're at it.
Okay. What's next?
Well, we had some training stuff. There was a question. Okay, I'm going to throw this one up. And I don't know what Dusty has on deck. I don't know. You know, you've got some stuff too, Ron. But there was a question about dumbbell rows. Do you put the knee on the bench or do you lean on the rack? I think I know what the answer is for both of you guys.
I never liked the knee on the bench because I think my arms are just too long. If I do the knee on the bench, the dumbbell hits the ground. So it was just always like, I remember immediately learning that like right off the bat. I was like, oh, these don't work for me. Because if you take like a shorter person and they put their knee on the bench, the dumbbell doesn't hit the ground.
Yeah.
So I right away started standing at the rack. And I know there's a lot of people, they argue whether you should have the dumbbell foot forward or the dumbbell foot back.
Yeah.
And then there's even some people that say you should have your feet parallel. That's actually the best for your core and how your hips stabilize and stuff like that. And the truth is, I've actually used all three stances for different reasons and with different weight dumbbells. And you know what I mean? I feel like you get the best stretch when you have the rowing leg back.
Yeah.
Yep.
You get the best stretch. And then when you have the rowing leg forward, it technically kind of locks your hips more.
Yep.
But I feel like you don't get as much of a stretch. And I was kind of like going for a reach on those. And then I did them for a while. I remember reading about how with your feet parallel to each other, like standing like neutral stance in dumbbell rowing, you're actually the least likely to like hurt your abdomen or get a hernia or some of the twisting stuff that happens through the midsection. So I tried those and I was strong with that stance too. So yeah, but I love dumbbell rows. They're great. But standing always with my hand out.
And I want you to guess, Scott, and then I can tell you you're wrong because it's neither of the two.
Okay.
I always like to just use my, like if I'm dumbbell rowing with my right arm, my left knee is for my forearm.
Yeah, you put your forearm on your knee.
Oh,
Yeah.
do you? Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't use the rack at all. You're kind of freestanding, basically.
Yeah,
I've
just
seen
raw
dumbbell.
dogging it.
I've seen Dusty do that. Raw dog in the dumbbell rows.
Yeah, I guess that's what that is, isn't it?
So what's funny though is I actually found that because I used to train at a really busy gym.
Okay.
And it was easier to just move a dumbbell where I needed to be. And I was like, I wonder if this will work. And I had seen it.
Yeah.
So I started with my hand on my knee, and that felt off. I was too upright. And then I brought it down to the forearm, and then I was like, oh, I like this better than anything I've been doing anyways. And that was the end of it. Because it really does allow you to. Now, I don't even, perfect example, not even joking, but I don't think Ron could do that. Because see, I have like really short arms. So like I can stretch down and forward doing that, no issue at all. That's how I convince Ron to pay all the time. I can't reach my wallet.
Right.
So it's
similar.
But no, that's my favorite way. I just feel I think when I'm describing to somebody how they should do a movement, where do you feel strong? That's the thing. Like to me, if your foundation is locked in, that's the best place. And I don't care what the book says or what anybody says. Like the other day, I saw a kid doing Smith rows with his feet totally together.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, is there something I don't know that's been going on in TikTok land? Do I suggest? Do I just keep my mouth shut? Because he was training hard, and I wasn't trying to like be an ass. It was more like, I wonder if he knows. So I left it alone. I was like, I'm sure he has a reason. I was like, I bet you he thinks he's doing something, so I'm just going to leave it alone. I told Nikki, I was like, yeah, I think he's doing something. She goes, I think you should have helped him. He didn't know. And I was like, I'm trying to like give him the benefit of the doubt. She's like, no, moron. He needed guidance and you didn't do it.
Just walked away.
But I was like, no, there's probably a smart reason he's doing this,
Yeah.
So, but no, that's my 2 cents is whatever of those 3 options makes you feel like you're planted in. I have a lot of clients that are taller like Ron. If they're in a busy gym, just bring the incline bench up and use the back of that.
Oh, I've done that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can figure that out too.
Yeah. I find that if I have my rowing leg too far back, I get in this habit where I like start twisting my whole body. You know what I mean? And so if I'll usually do like the feet close to parallel. Rowing foot is just like 2 inches back, but my hips are kind of square. And that way, to me, that movement, it's very similar to if I were doing like a barbell row, really, because I'm kind of hinging at the waist now. And because of the way that my hips are, I go all the way up. I can't do that like big rib cage twist. That
I tell people you shouldn't, your hips, like your back and your back leg shouldn't be a straight line. Like you should be hinged at the hip.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And your butt shouldn't move around.
No.
Your butt should be like pretty stationary, and you should hinge there slightly with the reps. Yeah. People don't quite get that.
I'll see guys do that, and then I also see a lot of like cushion in the knee where they let it down, and as they let it down, their knee bends, and then they stand back up as they're rowing it, and they don't realize they're getting like a ton of momentum on each rep,
Yeah, your lower body shouldn't move around very much at all, if at all.
Yeah.
So, okay.
You guys are pissing me off. Now I've got like thoughts of dumbbell rows. You ever do the just like a regular where you go, instead of going into the pocket, you row it up high with your elbow out to the side on a bench?
Yeah.
So
Never
like
really
almost like
done
a high
one
row.
arm like that.
Yeah.
No.
So
I've
that
seen
was
it.
something Turner Riddle had. We just did it one time training with him, and that became like the last thing I did all the time.
Yeah.
Because it's a great movement, especially if your dumbbells don't go super heavy, because you can nail the rear delt, keep everything, in line, but you also just get almost parallel to the ground and just really pull that elbow through. Awesome movement. Now I got to do those next time. We're going to do those this weekend.
Turner Riddle, he's pretty much insane in the gym. Am I right?
Oh, I love him. Yeah, one of my favorite people to train with.
That makes
He's
sense.
insane in life. That's why I like him so much.
Yeah, that all adds up. That tracks.
Yeah, it's fantastic. That's why he's wildly successful, because he doesn't know how to not do everything as hard as humanly possible.
Yeah.
It's funny, but when people will ask, because I get a lot of questions, I know you do too, Ron, like about health and financial health and things like that. And I'm like, work harder, work longer.
Right.
There you go. I mean, obviously you get into intricacies, but most of it is forget the clock as it exists and start working. That'll take care of your finances.
Yeah.
You know, and that's Turner in the gym, in life, as a dad. So we had workouts where I think sometimes we were just training for fun after a while, because we had went far beyond anything meaningful, and it was like, let's just keep going.
There's value in that, though.
Yeah, there
I
is.
think the, we do like to know what is optimal, and we do, especially now with all the data we have and all the science, it's very helpful, like extremely helpful. Like you have all these studies coming out now showing like where benefits for volume start to flatline, and where, like, you know what I mean? We have way more like data now, which shows us what we should be doing for optimal results. But then there's also, like we've said before, there's those workouts that are just for mental toughness almost, that, and you think, like, how important are those long term? You know what I mean? Just that mental toughness. Just doing stuff that's super, super hard. Like Mike Israetel had a video the other day of The Rock doing like a giant set for legs. And he was like, technically this is an inefficient way to train for hypertrophy, because all these exercises load the same muscles. So he'd be better off just doing straight sets, very close to failure, and just stacking hard sets with more load. And he'd probably get a lot more hypertrophy that way. But it's The Rock, and he's probably just trying to make himself tough and hard, and also remind himself of how it feels to push himself to the limit and gasp for air, and whatever, his paraphrasing, whatever he said, like, he probably doesn't care to get bigger. Like, it's not really,
he wants a hard workout.
He wants a hard workout. He wants to go in there and kill himself and be The Rock and set the standard and inspire a bunch of people. And so that's why he's giant setting, 4 compound leg exercises together, and which is like misery, I think of something more miserable than that. And so there's all sorts of reasons to do what we do in the gym. And, obviously if we're bodybuilders, we're looking for hypertrophy, but there's a lot of stuff that, it takes you back to football practice. Like, there's stuff we did just because it was like, if we do this now, the games will be easier. Like that sort of thing. Yeah.
That's very mirrored to your posing, Ron. I use you all the time with clients when I pose them, and I'm like, well, if it goes multiple rounds, you're gonna lose. And they're like, I'm like, your posing is slipping. We're on our second turn. Like, and there's something to be said. It's like, why did Branch never shake on stage? Well, have you ever trained in Arlington, Texas, in a gym with no air conditioning or moving air, pretty much, that plays a role. Well, guess what? He practices posing in the same way. And it reminds me, Lane Norton is probably my favorite follow on all of social media.
Right. He's good.
And the reason I love Lane is because he is science-based, and then he immediately follows up with, by the way, the street side of it. And he did a thing multiple times I've seen where he talks about it's not optimal to train to absolute failure. And he breaks the whole thing down, and I can hear my clients, Dusty says train to failure. And then his very last line is, but the good news is most of you have never been close to failure.
Right.
Right. And that's
no
the
idea
key.
What true failure is. Yeah.
So it's like, if you actually knew how far your body could go, you'd realize at that point that you think is failure isn't anyways. So that's fine.
Right.
And that's why I think all of those types of things are so valuable. Like you said, Ron, it's like you look back and they're also the best times. We had a question. I'm just going to do a quick slide over that I think is a great option, where somebody asked, what was your favorite prep, and did that prep result in your best physique?
Yeah, it was, what was your favorite prep, like your best look versus your best placing? That's what it was. Something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. I'd say my favorite prep was probably my first prep with Aceto.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I hadn't accumulated any injuries yet, major injuries yet. Like, I was training pretty much doing whatever I wanted in the gym still. It was the last prep I had where I didn't have something kind of wrong with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Physically. And I mean, I dealt with some injuries by that point, but that last year, the first year with the Aceto, I was like doing whatever I wanted on leg day and stuff like that. And I remember Chris saying, like, geez, the only person I fed more food to was Jay. This is crazy. Like, my body was just devouring everything, and I was getting lean, and I was having high days all over the place. And it was super exciting too, because like I'd never been that far, like technically ahead.
Yeah.
And my glutes came in the earliest they'd ever come in before. And it was just like a really good prep.
And was it
And
your favorite look too?
yeah, it was probably
Yeah.
my favorite, probably one of my, I had a few looks that were close, but it was one of my favorite looks for sure. And then the year I turned pro, I actually didn't like my look at all. Because I didn't like my physique at that point. I'd accumulated so many injuries. I wasn't able to train the way I wanted. I didn't like how certain things looked. I didn't like my body weight. I'd had a terrible off season with tons of recovery involved. And, it was sort of a Hail Mary attempt to get my pro card. So like, I don't really like that look. You know what I mean? So it's funny. It's funny. Yeah.
How about
When you're young and bulletproof.
No, Scott. I want you to hear. I want to hear yours because I have my own opinion of yours, so I want to hear it.
Okay. I think my favorite was the last year I competed, and that was 2017, because I was doing that while I worked full time as a coach, and so all of my preps before that, I had to put all my eggs in one basket, and I had to get everything had to be all for this one show. And I had to, months ahead of time, schedule time off from work. Cause I always worked Saturdays, and shows are always on Saturdays for those of you guys who haven't competed in the NPC. So I always had to schedule time off, and it was always going to be like, I hope I do my best on this show, cause it's not like I can do it again a few weeks later. Well, this year I competed multiple times because I freaking could. I had every Saturday off. Right. And I competed in July, and I competed again in the very beginning of September, and then in October and in November. And it was cool. I dieted from February all the way through November, and there was not a single minute that I regretted any of it or that I was bummed. I do remember feeling really brain dead by the end. And Tommy Styles and I did a podcast together. We were both going to do the show in November, Dusty. And I was like, hey, why don't we get on and do a podcast? We're both really brain dead right now. And we'll just let people know what it's really like to be at this stage.
This is how dumb we are right now.
Yeah. I hadn't taken on any new clients for a month at that point. I just I couldn't deal with it. But I was loving everything about this. So yeah, that was probably my favorite. And I probably had my best peak that year too, I would say. But I think my best look was honestly years before that when I was a middleweight. I loved my look as a middleweight. One year I just freaking nailed the conditioning, and I needed to be bigger still. There was definitely a lot of flaws there. Oh yeah, you really got to bring this up and bring that up, and overall you need more size. But I was like, I really like that look. That was a cool one.
Yeah.
So you said 17 was the year that you did the last show that you were talking about?
Yeah, the last.
And what year did you alter the back training that made such huge changes?
That was in 2021 or 2020.
So that was after you were done?
Yeah, man. And dude, that's why I was, because people were asking me, Dusty. People were asking me, they're like, are you going to compete? And I was heavier than I'd ever been. And I unlocked a new level, right? So I started thinking I'm heavier than I've ever been. And I started saying, if I get 10 more pounds, and I didn't tell anybody, I was like, I'm going to get back on stage again, because I'd be 20 pounds heavier in my off season with abs than I'd ever been if I could get 10 more pounds. And it never even happened. But unfortunately, life had different plans for me. But I'm glad I could do what I did,
Oh, yeah. I love that. That's so funny, because I was assuming that was before. That's how much I pay attention. Scott has told me the story 9 times. So I'll ask him in a week.
We were recording the podcast. There were days that I was doing that back workout and then running over here and putting my headphones on really quick,
That's bonkers. Yeah. I mean, my favorite, I had a lot of, I think I got really, really fortunate. Chris never missed with me. I had an off look when I had personal bullshit. I over dieted once because I asked to.
Yeah.
But he never ever missed. And so what made that fun is I was determining the looks. He and I were along the way. I even had a pro show where I came in a little not my conditioning, just to see how would that hang with those guys, because it kind of kept my strength stronger and my weaknesses were weak anyway. So we'll see. And it was one of those scenarios where it actually did work pretty well on stage, but I didn't like it. And I was never going to make any money on stage. And I realized that immediately. Like, I was looking at the pictures. I'm like, I look awesome if the show was in 6 weeks. Like, I mean, anyone else would be like, oh, you look great, you're ready to go. But like, I knew what I was capable of. So I did not enjoy, that was the California Pro I did one year. And I was very, very big and did okay.
Were you like 270 on stage?
Yeah, I was monstrous. But I was like, I think that I respect condition. So that's why like, I'll see a lightweight at a show that's just sliced.
Yeah.
I will go find him backstage and be like, that was ridiculous. I do not care what you weigh, because even if you have a great metabolism, to get inside out sliced requires something missing up there. And I just respect that. That's, being genetically gifted to be very big or have shape or whatever just doesn't blow my mind. But I would argue my two best looks were 10, the first year I worked with Aceto, and then 14 when I turned pro. And the reason I say that is because both of those times, as soon as I saw shots, I was like, oh shit, like, that's me. And there aren't many times, and you guys both know this, that you see yourself and think it's good.
Yeah. We're our worst critics.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm not even talking about compared to anybody else. I just mean, like, you always know what can be better. And there's just those couple moments in your career that are so awesome because you look and go, oh, like, today was the day.
Yeah.
Tomorrow this won't be here. Yesterday it wasn't here, but today, there it is. So that's fun. And both of those shows did that. I think my happiest moment was in 10 when I did the Junior Nationals, because I had never done a big show, and Dave Palumbo asked me for an interview, and so he said, like, who's your biggest competition coming into this show? And I literally answered. I said, I think when you see me tomorrow, you'll know it doesn't matter. Like, I just knew that I was on. And I'm thinking to myself, I've never done a show this big. That was arrogant as shit.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it panned out, but it was wild. So I do have a topic for you guys that I thought would be great to discuss. Was there ever a prep that you did at any point in your career where you got in your head? Started to like stress about the shows, or I've had a lot of that with clients lately, and a close friend of ours too that had like a miniature little meltdown that we had to put back together. And I'm curious, A, if you've had that, but B, how do you help clients or yourself at that time snap out of that so that they can continue to progress?
Yeah, actually, probably one of my toughest preps ever was my last, like, the year I got my pro card. And it was because I couldn't train the way I wanted to train. So I was very frustrated. Like, I would go to the gym and I would have like major problems with my knee, and I wouldn't have a good quad day. And I'd be like, how the fuck can I step on stage and compete for a pro card when I wasn't really able to like hack squat properly today? And I was like, I know that my diet's going good, and I know my body fat's coming down, and I know that I'm getting leaner, but like, like, this show was hard enough for me to win when
you were healthy,
training like a animal. How the hell can I get a pro card if I can't train like an animal? Because my previous standard for how I trained for that show was always like so crazy. So I was like, damn, like, is this possible? And then I just kept telling myself, like, and whether it's true or not, I kept telling myself, well, you've been beaten by a bunch of guys who don't train as hard as you. So maybe how hard you train isn't the problem. Maybe there's a strategy issue. And if you just figure that out, these injuries won't matter. Right. And of course, I'm not putting down like all the guys that beat me because they train super hard, but that was just my little mantra that I would say, like, your training intensity is not the problem.
Right.
You've been training maybe you're training too hard for this show. Maybe you're on like these low calories and you're destroying yourself in the gym, and it's actually hurting your physique. And, maybe this will be the year. So there was like that Hail Mary kind of like just trust the process thing, but it was very, very difficult. And I also had like that feeling of desperation because I was 39 and I promised myself I wouldn't compete past the age of 40. And I was like, man, like this is it. And I had told Emily and Chris, this was my last nationals. Like, this is it. It's the last show. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I just had all that, and there was some very stressful moments. Like there was some times when I said to Emily, like, should I do this? You know, like 10 weeks out. And I'm like, should I do this? Like, you know, like I know I'm getting leaner and I see my pictures changing, and there was a drastic change going on too. Cause I had, like I said, a really bad, like off season of like resting my body. So I was like small and fat and 300 pounds, and my legs and arms were down. And like my starting position was terrible. Like that's the year I told you I sent my pictures to Chris and he said, you have 20 weeks and you need every single one of them.
Yeah.
Right. And when Chris says that to you, you're like, oh shit. Like he's like in his business. And then his very next text was 1,000 test, 500 EQ, 5 IUs a GH, go.
I love how he speaks.
Because I'd been off for like months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, hammer.
Now we're diving in.
Week 1. Now go. And I was like, oh shit. And this is a guy who'd started me on like 250 tests before.
Yep.
Like, okay, prep starts, take a Sustanon, let's see how you look next week. Like that was a previous. So that tells you where I was. I was in like where Chris looked at my pictures and he was like, this is an emergency.
Yeah.
So
he needs muscle and he has to lose fat. We have to do both.
Yeah, because we'd never done that before.
Yep.
Like Chris, all my preps with Chris, I'd be like 10 weeks out, I'd have to text him. Like, am I on enough drugs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he'd be like, yeah, maybe we could up it a little bit, like that sort of thing. And then this year it was like, let's start today.
Yeah.
So that was a tough year, man. It was a tough year. But I had a lot of structure because I was working at Mutant. I just moved out here to take that office job. So I had an office job. So I had a ton of structure. My meals were exactly the same times, which really helped. Like if I'd have been living my old lifestyle where I was, you know, bartending on weekends and running my own schedule all day long, it might have been too much free time for my mind.
Right.
But I had a lot to think about. I had a lot of travel, a lot of trips. There was a lot of reasons why I had to nail everything. Had to do my cardio on time, had to train at certain times. It was very, very forced structure. And I came out of it with the card. But that was probably the toughest year where I questioned myself the most. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love the fact that you knew it was also, I could definitely see that. It was like, because I was the same as far as like I had a line of how long I would compete, but I never had to get up to it. So that would have been a little bit, that would probably be the only time I'm like, holy shit, I really hope I do this. What about you, Scott? Did you have any mind screws along the way?
I think every show there was something. And I wanted to say too real quick, I'm really glad we're talking about this. I think we maybe touched on this stuff an episode a little while back, but I have a client who competed this season and he did really well and he moved up like tremendously from where he was before, but he didn't win his pro card. And now this isn't in an arrogant way. He can't shake the feeling of feeling like he let me down and feeling like he should have done better. And I'm glad he's told me that because we've talked about it. But like, there's still something in the back of his head where he's a new guy to that level, and and he's still kind of, I think, struggling with it a little bit. I think it's important for them to hear, being in our audience, guys like that, to hear that you guys have, that we've all been through something along those lines. I feel like there's always something that comes up. Every prep I've questioned myself in some way or another. It for me, it had never been, I don't know. I wasn't at your level, Ron, where I was like, oh man, this is like, I'm at that pro card level. I'm just like, I really just want to do the best I can. So for me, it was a different perspective. I wanted to win every show I did, but I also recognized that like, I wasn't the best guy in the world. Still though, it's like, I don't know. I stopped and questioned myself every show. And I think that we all do that. And I think if you, I don't have a specific situation I can pull out, but I feel like if you're giving your all, like you're giving 100%, that it's gonna come up, because I don't know. The opposite is I've seen people who who never feel that way, but they also don't give their all. I don't know. I've seen some guys with really good genetics who kind of like hold back, and they're like, yeah, but you know, they leave themselves excuses. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, for sure.
I didn't even stop doing cheat meals.
You know, 6-week diet or yeah.
Oh, it's just a 6-week diet. So they kind of have that cushion. But a guy like Ron or myself or you, Dusty, if we're going to go into something, we're literally putting it all on the line. This is the best that I could do. And there's a level of honesty that comes with that can be like brutally painful. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I got a good story. It's probably like 6 weeks out or 5 weeks out. Like I was getting close. I remember I was lean, like very lean, because I remember like how my legs felt through my sweatpants.
Yeah.
Like, there was like, I could feel striations up the outside edge, and I could feel veins just completely covering them when I trained. And I was in a lot of pain. My knee, I hadn't torn my quad yet. This was when my knee was just bad. And I was in a lot of pain. So I remember I was having a frustrating workout, and I said, okay, I'm just going to do sets of 30 reps, and I'll like just destroy my legs. So I overdid volume. Like I was doing like, okay, I'm going to do 5 sets of 30 on the leg press, and I'm going to do 5 sets of 30 on the extension.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to do 5 sets of 20 on the hack. Like just insane shit. No matter what poundage you're using, you're just like crushing yourself. And it was really hot. I was training through the summertime. It gets hot out here. Like we get to like 100 degrees on a hot day out here. And I had a leg workout, and I was completely drained. Like I had volumed the crap out of myself. I was soaking wet. I stunk like ammonia. Like I was getting protein breakdown. Like I was in rough shape. And I remember my face was cramping when I was leaving the gym. So I had like an electrolyte imbalance.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel good. And I was like, oh man. And I'm driving home, and I go, I'm going to puke. Okay, well, I'm no stranger to puking after leg day. So here comes some branch chains and water. Right. And I tried to pull over, but traffic was a little sketchy, and I was trying to get into a parking lot to get off the road. And I didn't quite get out of my truck. And I opened my door to my Jeep, and I projectile vomited against the door, the inside of the door. So the puke hit the door and then ran down the door.
Yeah.
Right. And it got in like the door.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you did.
And to my delight, it wasn't branch chains and water. It was white fish and green beans. And branch chains and water. So my meal from before training hadn't even totally left my guts yet, because I just must have been a little behind on my meal or something, just for some reason. And I just thought, well, holy fuck, God. And I had to clean that out. So the fuck do you do, right? You just drive home with the window down, and you go up and get a roll of paper towel, and you come back down with the spray bottle, and you spend a half an hour cleaning the inside of your door off. And you still haven't taken care of the fact that your face is twitching.
Yeah,
and
no, of course not.
You still haven't eaten yet.
No.
So like, it was just like one of those things, man. But I remember just thinking, like, if I'm going to go through this type of shit, like, better be some kind of payoff at the end of this one. This is the last one.
No wonder Ron doesn't like fish anymore. You know,
I wonder you didn't take Dorian's fish.
Bassa. It was Bassa and green beans.
Oh man,
that's the worst. I hadn't heard that story. I heard the one about the cop. I remember the one with you puked in front of a cop, and he thought you were drinking or something.
Yeah. You have anything to drink tonight? No, I just trained legs. Okay.
So I just wanted to add one little tweak for the listeners, because you said something, Scott, that I've had people say to me before, even clients. So I like to erase it, which is whatever show you're getting ready for is your Olympia. So like he was like, I haven't done that. It doesn't matter. That
absolutely.
Show is your Olympia. And I think it's important that people get that, because when I'm prepping someone for a show, best in the world, like that's the mindset, you know what I mean? And the reason this is a tricky subject for me, because I had a client, I've got a friend right now that was going through it as well, is actually it's never happened to me.
Really?
But the reason is not because of arrogance, it's because I always just did everything I could. And I didn't have any confusion on who I was. And I understood that no matter what happened, it was what it was. There's no defense in bodybuilding. I couldn't stop someone from coming. Like, my mindset was simple. If you can beat me at my best, congratulations.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing I can do. And I think more people should really, and I just loved bodybuilding. Loved prepping. Ron knows this. I mean, we've had this conversation in my room before a show. I'm like, wish I didn't actually have to go compete. I never liked competing.
Yeah.
I remember the morning of the Vancouver Pro, I had to look at Dusty in his room, and he pulled out a Pop-Tart and started eating it. And he's like, well, I guess we better go do this show. And I was like, yeah, it'd be fun to just like sit here and chat and go for a meal. Like, you look how you look. Awesome. Let's go eat. Like,
that's always how it was for me. It was about the process. And I think that if you can take that on, you will have your best result. Because we all know that stress is the Antichrist. If you're trying to get bigger and you're stressing, it won't happen. If you're trying to get leaner and you're stressing, it won't happen. Whether it's an outside stress or an internal stress, you're only screwing yourself. So for me, it's really simple. I mean, if you're ever having a moment where you're stressing, just ask, am I following my diet? Am I doing my cardio? Am I training as hard as I can? Am I doing my best to get rest? Okay. That's it. I mean, there is nothing. I used to tell clients way back in the day that Jay Cutler couldn't help it that Ronnie Coleman existed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
good.
Jay wouldn't change anything during those time periods other than maybe if Ronnie wasn't here, only he'll be the first to tell you that we wouldn't have had the Jay we had if Ronnie wasn't there.
Yeah.
So,
the challenges make you. Your failures.
You just have to jam against yourself. And I really do think it's important because I've had multiple clients this year say, well, this show is different. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, it's nationals, it's this. I'm like, it's the same sport. Doesn't matter. Like, the stage doesn't matter. Like, literally, it's the exact same thing. I don't know why you would let the title of the show determine that it's now stressful.
You know what, Dusty? I think that's one of the reasons I enjoyed that 17 prep that I had mentioned, is because I really knew my place at that point.
Right.
I really knew my place, and I knew that, like, hey, I'm going to try to do this to be better. And guess what? Like, I'm going to try this experiment with my Puke, and if I learn something from it, then I'm going to be able to use that with my clients, Right. And then after that, I'm like, oh, next time I'm going to try this, and, just kind of tweak things, get it better and better for the sake of learning and for the sake of fun,
Yeah.
I want to see something real quick, Scott, because it's just a perfect example. Let's see here.
And Ron, we should do your question. You had that one we talked about before the show.
Oh yeah,
the digital media stuff.
I was hoping I could pop a picture real quick, but an example was my first pro qualifier was 2010, and that was back in the boards were still going.
Yeah,
and Jason Hull was posting his progress pictures during that prep.
Yeah.
And basically it meant that everyone else was coming for second place.
Okay.
And everyone came in nasty still because you were just prepping for yourself. I mean, the pictures he had in his kitchen that year, it was literally comical to be getting ready for the show because you're like, well, you're not beating him. And it just didn't change anything. I found like one photo. It's not even like his best one, but
yeah, I just looked too. I'm not seeing any of the old old pictures.
I just sent you one from Google, but when you're seeing these kind of photos, which should be coming through you any second, Scott.
Oh yeah, yep. Give me just a second here. Oh, it's like, it's not here.
When I opened it, it cleared up.
Yeah, I can't even click. Oh, there we go. There's a Ron. Oh, I got the Ron picture. Oh, there we go. No, it's not clearing up for me. But you guys can at least. Oh, there we go. It did.
Oh yeah, I remember those giant, ridiculous arms.
Yeah, so like you're getting ready for your first pro qualifier, and you're built like a refrigerator, and that guy's in your class. That's why
Yeah.
you have to just do your own prep. And it never even bothered me. I was on the boards all the time, chatting up, met him backstage. It was super cool. It was like, cool, this is the guy that's beating everybody today. Anyways,
Yeah.
hope I can get
Those
top 5.
arms, Jesus.
Yeah.
The side shots were even better because his hamstrings went from his ass to like
the
his
legs
ankle.
were crazy.
I was trying to find one of those, but I couldn't.
What shot is this, Ron?
Oh, that's the morning I got my
Nasty
pro
peel,
card.
man.
Ron with no
That's
skin.
Yeah.
Morning I got my card. Yeah.
There's something about being sliced, man. That's just.
I remember I came off stage and I sent Chris a text. I said, I just got my pro card. And he goes, I know. And I go, oh, who told you? And he goes, the most muscular shot this morning.
Nothing tops conversations with Chris in any way.
I thought someone texted him. I go, oh, someone texted you? He goes, no, I saw the most muscular this morning.
I love how this shot, though, in your head, you were thinking to yourself, like, this isn't, I don't like this look. This isn't.
Yeah, my legs weren't as big as they had been, like a bit. And I also had problems with one of my lats that irritated me. And my one tricep was bothering me. And my elbow was really bad. And, just in your head, you're like, I'm not my best. So that's why I was so peeled. Like I had to be peeled. Like I had to look like that all over my body. Like the fibers in my delts had to be the same as the ones on my glutes, and I had to look like that all over the place. Yeah, because there was just no room to not look like that.
You reminded me, Ron, when you said that you needed. Chris said you needed all 20 weeks. I used to send every time I'd send him my start point pictures, he'd go, "Well, it's better that you're big and fat than small and fat."
Yeah,
I was like, I got fat again. Sorry.
True.
I liked food.
Yeah.
What can I say?
Yeah. Also, another thing was most of the times I did my best were the years when I can honestly say I worried. Well, not worried because I always worried, but the years where whenever I sort of felt like I sacrificed a little size for more condition.
Right.
I always had people tell me, man, you looked awesome. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm so hard on my clients. Like, we all have those clients. We help them for a show. They look great, but they get in their head, oh, I could have been bigger. Ron brought me down 5 pounds a little too far.
Yeah.
That whole, and then they do their own thing for the next prep. They're not as hard or something, right? Like everyone has that. Like a lot of guys go through that. That's not uncommon. Oh, I got peeled for that show, but next show I'll be 10 pounds bigger. And then they're not as hard. And then they don't in place as well.
I've done
and
that.
It's like, there's a reason, why I push people to come down to get peeled. It's because on stage, I don't care how you feel about how big you are. On stage, you look more crazy. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, and that was always the case with me. Whenever I was like grainy all over the place, people would always say, man, what a great look. How much weight did you gain this year? I'd be like, man, I'm actually lighter. So, okay, I had a question. It was about, remember when we were talking about diets and how our digital intake, our YouTube, our Instagram, it's all part of our diet. Yes. We have to modulate our diet so that we don't drive ourselves insane in today's social media driven world. I had a question was, what steps are you taking and what recommendations do you have to regulate your digital diets? And I just thought I'd ask you guys. I mean, there's stuff that I do, but I just thought I'd ask you guys, like, what have you done to sort of consciously make sure you're not taking in too much junk food digitally?
So mine was simple. I find that a lot of what's on social media and stuff irritates me. So I've actually had to do the opposite, which is I have times that I make myself go on and work. Because if I wasn't doing social media for business, for clients, for Mutant, I wouldn't have it.
Right.
Because I like YouTube. I decide what I watch.
Yeah.
I go in and look at what I want to look at. You know what I mean? So it's become the opposite because I also find, and sorry to my friends that take this personally when it's not about them, I don't like following people too closely on Instagram and stuff because then I find out I don't like them.
That's such a Dusty thing to say.
I'm like,
I used
oh,
to like
thought
you
I
till I
liked
got to
you,
know you.
but you kept jamming it
Up until
out
I got to
there.
know you,
I
you
learned
were
more about
really-
your life. And, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really rough thing. So I just find it safer but I do that pretty often because, and on the flip, sometimes you realize you're like, oh, that kid from the gym, he's got his shit together. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
But I do find a lot of that, and it's because in a lot of ways I find that what I mean when I say I don't like them, it's because I don't like their online version.
Right.
Because they're not being themselves. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I'm okay if somebody doesn't like me for who I am. That's perfect, and I even understand. I could see why something I would do would rub you the wrong way.
Yeah.
But
There's
I would
often
hate
days I'm not sure I
for
like you. Yeah.
yeah, regularly. I would hate for someone to like meet me and go, "Oh, you're so much different in person." You know, Ron gets that. I mean, I've heard Ron get that. I get it all the time as well. People are like, "Oh man, Ron, you're just like on the show," and he's like, "Well, that's me."
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
so that is my tempering, and I also think it's because I remind myself that I think having kids helps in that you realize that people are just addicted to consuming. They just it's like you wouldn't eat food the way you get on your Instagram. Like it blows my mind when you used to get to a stoplight and how often you have to honk the horn because the person in front of you got on their phone. I'm like, what? It's a minute and a half.
Right.
Like, be present with the things you're doing. If you're watching television with your wife, watch the damn TV.
Yes.
If you're at dinner, eat dinner. If you're driving your car, turn the radio up, look out the damn window. Like, you don't need to consume all the time. In between sets at the gym, I'm not trying to be hardcore. Just be in the gym. You're doing the thing you love to do. Be there, because if you are here, it doesn't matter where you are. You're not there. And that's wild to me.
I never use my phone when I'm driving.
Yeah.
Like my phone goes in a compartment and it could be a 45-minute drive. I don't touch it. I never touch my phone driving. I'm really good at that. Yeah. More people need to do that. It's dangerous.
Well, I'm not even talking. I mean, for me, it's just that it's about being present. Like,
Yeah.
how many people miss just basic things? Like, you know, right now here, and you're going to see that this week's run. Hard to beat a time to roll the window down and turn the radio up than right now when it's 70 degrees in the morning and like flawless. I want to notice that it's nice outside.
Right.
I want to take that in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's just nothing going on that's pressing that I need to check right now. And with this day and age, when I get text messages, I'm very fortunate that I can push a button on my screen and it reads it to me. And then I could verbally answer and never touch my phone. You know? And that kind of stuff I think got really more important because I've actually lost a few friends to texting in vehicles. And it's like, there's a reason those buttons are there. They're awesome. Quick
Right.
touch, you know? I mean, it's simple to do those things, but it is really more, I'm not even selfishly, it's just being in moments are important. And that's what we do at the house. Like if we got to dinner and I need to work, I will tell Nikki before we get there, everyone in this restaurant is going to think I'm an asshole, but we've been slammed today. So for the first 20 minutes that we sit down, do whatever you want. I got to work. She's
Right.
like, okay.
Right.
Like, and I don't even look at her. I'm just, and I get done. Okay.
Yeah.
Where were we? You know?
I do a bunch of things. I mute a lot of people because I want to
Watching
follow
you,
them
buddy.
because like I like them. There's a lot of people I like in real life. And I follow them because they follow me. But then maybe I think their content isn't really part of the diet I want. Right. And a lot of that can be complaining, people who complain a lot, or people who do angry, relatively negative content a lot, where they're complaining about stuff like, look at this stupid idiot. Like people who talk like that, I quite often will just mute them. And I just am just trying to limit that sort of stuff overall. Because if you mute, 20, 30 people like that, it makes an overall difference to your intake. And then there's a bunch of channels that I was following, but I realized that their content irritates me. And when I stop and watch it, it makes my heart rate go up or blood pressure get this is going to piss you off. And it's like a thing about the government. I'm like, okay, I just got to unfollow this channel. I can't be doing this to myself. So there's a lot of stuff I mute. I also I think, when Instagram started going, you follow this channel, cause they're fun, but I realize it's garbage content. So I'm just going to unfollow it now. And I've unfollowed hundreds of channels on Instagram. Some of them people that I know, some of them are news channels, or like I said, Waffle House fights, we all go down those rabbit holes where we're watching people road rage caught on tape, and I'm like, you know what? I can't, I don't want this stuff coming into my brain and sidetracking me and making me irritated. It makes me think, what an idiot, so I unfollow a lot of that stuff. And Dusty's right about YouTube. I love YouTube, and I follow only channels that are stuff I want to learn about, I follow Lex Friedman and some of the good podcasts that have on interesting people and, guitar stuff and, that sort of thing. So I really did try to modulate my intake more and more as time goes by. Yeah.
YouTube will get you with the shorts. The shorts will get you though, because you're on one topic and then you scroll to the next, and now it's like a bar fight, and you scroll to the, you know what I mean? Those will
the shorts will get you. Still creep in. Oh, I still see the odd Waffle House fight. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, try not to like it.
Yeah, I was going to look at an example of limiting with someone who I know who's very, very successful. Is Chris Aceto. And this is something I love about Chris. Chris doesn't follow any of us. But he will come on your page and read stuff and comment or tag you in something. And I bring that up because when you're cleansing your social media, it's not personal.
Does he know how to follow people?
Yeah. Well, here's the funny thing about it. He was
taking that personal.
He used to follow a bunch of us, and I think for whatever reason, he doesn't anymore. And it isn't because we pissed him off or there was some issue, it just makes me laugh. He does not follow any of us, but we're friends.
Funny.
And I just think that that's an example of somebody who he is so ridiculously busy, and he is somebody who if I'll text him, this, Ron, if you shoot Chris a text, he'll go back and forth with you for 10 minutes. He doesn't actually have time to do that. So I think it's probably best he doesn't bump into our random stuff and go down rabbit holes with us.
Did you see? Here's just a quick question. Did you see the post he did about the guy that didn't pay him?
Oh, I saw that.
I went in. I annihilated him, and then somebody was arguing with me about it.
I saw that too.
Well, what would you do if this happened to your daughter? I'm like, I would be glad that they got publicly destroyed for being assholes, and I'd be embarrassed as their parent.
Did you see the update he added to it?
No, I didn't.
No.
He said, author's update. The winner on the left in socks pays his bills now. The guy on the right in the fake expensive sandals only sends fake payments. Because I sent him, because the initial post was, which one of these two champs temporary run-in with dementia failed to pay his prep guy. Yeah, so I messaged and I go, what's this about? He goes, both of them. One guy didn't pay me. One guy didn't pay Cormier.
Right.
But then he updated it. The winner in the left pays his bills. The other guy sends fake payments.
That's amazing.
And then he messaged me. He goes, you should go on there and tell people how I drove to Canada because you accidentally got a conversion wrong and owed me $5. So yeah. Funny guy.
That was a riot. I that made me laugh because we talked about that off the air, and I've done that many times. I've had solid people. I had this last week. A guy was like, I sent him a text. I'm like, hey, you didn't check in. He goes, yeah, I'm a little behind. I can't pay right now. I'm going to pay in 2 weeks. So I'll send pictures then. And I'm like, no. Send them now. I don't want to lose 2 weeks because you're working. It's all good, because I think when you're working with people, I prefer to do it that way. The only difference is if I ever don't get paid, I'm okay with it because that was my decision. I can stop at any point, but I work with so many solid people. It's been years since I've been robbed, and I don't care.
Hey, I'll add this about the consuming, like what did you call it? Like your digital consumption run.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I genuinely think about that with the content that we put out too. Like I feel like, and we hear it, from our listeners. So like, you guys are real positive and all of that. Cause I feel like if we're putting out, man, on average, it's like 4 hours. Like you could be consuming 4 hours of content per week just listening to our show, and I feel like we have a duty to like not add to the like bullshit that's out there. So like we might go down a rabbit hole here and there, but for the most part, I feel like I try to add to like the positive experience that social media can be, because like you could consider us social media or content, for sure that you're following. So I just figured I'd throw that out there, and I want to throw out a suggestion too. We've been watching this channel. Victoria had found it a while ago. She's watched it for a long time. It's called Yes Theory, and they have a side project called Seek Discomfort. And it's like a travel channel basically, but it's these guys that they've made so much money with this now they can basically do anything they want. And like an example is they just did an episode where they're in the UK and they wanted to find somebody who had never left the UK before and had a passport, and that they were all going to travel with him to some location, spin the globe and put their finger on it. And wherever it landed, they're taking this guy with them for like a week trip, So, and so it just had to be and it had to be a stranger, somebody who wasn't familiar with the channel. So they literally like went out on the streets and they tried to like solicit this. They had signs. They're like, do you have a passport and have never left the UK? And they found this young guy who had a passport, never left the UK. And they ended up going to Brazil with him. And then it was just like such a cool experience, and it like enriched this kid's life in such a huge way. You know what I mean? And it's just the idea of their channel though is to seek discomfort, to basically put yourself out there, to explore the world and not be limited by what you think your comfort zone should be. I guess that's the way I'd sum it up. Awesome channel though, so I suggest you.
Yeah, I think me traveling with
after
someone
you
I
watch
didn't know
this.
Sounds very uncomfortable.
I bet that I'm thinking that they probably like vetted at them. You know what I mean? Like,
I would want a little vetting. Like do they chew with their mouth open? Stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Any mental health issues we should be aware of, stuff
That's
like
okay.
that.
I have those. But,
Yeah. Okay, perfect. You'll fit right in. Yeah.
Oh, you too? Great.
Yeah. It's a cool channel though. It's fun.
That's
and
cool.
My thing is that like every time we watch it, I don't care what mood I'm in, I feel happy after I watch it. Versus there's stuff, even with gun stuff, where they're like, they're not allowing you to bring firearms into the, Texas State Fair, and that the governor is doing this. And I'm like, son of a bitches, and it's like, if I walk away from that, I'm not feeling good, And so even though it's something I care about, I try to like limit how much, do I really want to click on that versus click on something that makes me feel the way Yes Theory makes me feel. Because I walk away from that and I feel great.
Yeah. If I want to check in on the news, I want to go on YouTube and I want to manually do it.
Yeah.
Like at a certain time. Like, I'm going to check the news before I go to bed, see what's new. Yeah. But I don't want to be triggered throughout the day with news because I'm busy.
Yeah. You
So,
control it. You control it.
Yeah, control it.
Sorry, I had to throw that in.
No, that's good. Okay. Wow. That was good. I feel like that's an episode.
I think it's an episode. I think they've had enough.
Yeah, they've had enough. Dusty knows.
They've definitely had enough. Dusty knows.
Okay. Dusty knows when you've had enough. Okay. Well, thanks to the last 5 Minute Crew for hanging out. I know you're still with us. Keep that hashtag going. Remember to ask questions on the YouTube. We love seeing questions on the YouTube for the next episode. So keep those cooking. I got a text back from Evan while we were on the air saying I'd come on anytime.
Oh, cool. Nice. We should get him on.
So we'll get him on right away.
All right.
Okay. Remember, everybody, like, share, subscribe, comment, and
ring the bell.
Yes. And remember, IamMutant.com. Get your ISO search, get your all in, and everyone should get on the gear. And remember, the new Mindfuck, Weak Minds Die. Give it a try. It's an awesome product. I'm loving it. We don't have it up in Canada, but I get it, from the source, so I can still use it pre-workout. But we're getting it soon.
You should, as you should.
Yeah. Remember Dusty 20, Big Ron 20. Save yourself 20%. Remember the Think Big Patreon. Keep a producer homed.
Thank you,
The
guys.
show's cranking. Scott does a lot of work for the channel, so keep the Patreon running. If you guys are familiar with Patreon or not, you can do any amount. It can just be a couple of bucks a month, but it all adds up. Helps
out a lot.
Helps Scott, pay the power bill over there at Fort Podcast there, where he's got a full he's got, I imagine, computers just running 24 hours a day, constantly editing, nonstop, burning through sets of headphones.
I see it like in a movie theater, when you see a movie and they've got this whole room with stuff. That's what Scott's basement is in my head.
Yeah,
That's the room here. That's the room here. It's all computer stuff
Before
and
we
then
go,
some gun stuff over there.
Before we go, let's play a quick game called Closest Firearm to Scott. What is it?
Oh, man. It would be... Oh, I just took my gun off. It's right here. Glock 43X.
That's for the last 5 minute crew.
Yes.
I know
they need to know.
He didn't even get out of his chair. That's so funny.
He goes, I like how he made it seem like it was so far, though. He goes, it's right here.
Oh, right here.
I didn't know.
I thought he'd
Usually
have
I
to,
just know.
the half stand up where your ass comes out of the seat just so you can reach.
Yeah.
I thought there'd be at least like a bit of a stand and reach, but no.
There wasn't even like a one cheek sneak reach. It was just
A lot can happen in the half stand up, Ron.
Yeah. You're not quite ready. If it's a half stand up away, you're not prepared.
Yes.
Right?
I have Donna, so I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah. Just chuck her at the intruder.
She will be at that door before they.
Okay.
I'd get to look over when they're in the front yard.
Taken down. Okay. Thanks, everybody. And remember, it's just bodybuilding.